Call to order.
Yep.
Just did. You want to do a roll call before we?
Yeah.
All right, so, Chair Shrubnik,
Here.
Vice Chair Dembowski,
Here.
hey, Board Member Perry. Board Member Mead. Board Member Arndt,
Here.
Board Member Mankey.
Yep.
And alternate Board Member Dodd.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
All right, so next item is public comment. Do we have anyone online for public comment?
We did not receive written comment, but there is a member of the public online. If you would like to provide public comment at this time, please do so.
Hi there, I'm Barbara Anderson. As Nathan said, I'm a member of the Board of Directors, Vice President of the Board of Directors, and don't have any comment at this point. I'm just eager to hear the meeting tonight. So best wishes to all of you.
Beautiful. All right. So let's move on to the consent agenda. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed. So moved. Second. Any questions or concerns? Questions or comments, discussion? All right, let's do this by acclamation. All those in favor of the consent agenda say aye.
Aye.
Any nay? All right, the consent agenda passes. Okay, moving on to senior center levy planning. Steve.
Hello, Christine here. So this item is here, it's the senior center levy planning, and we are coming up to the end of our current levy in the next year. And so we really need to start talking about path forward for either renewing the current levy or what the next levy will look like if it's not what we're doing currently. So these are the questions that we need to keep in mind are, will the NPRSA be renewing the current capital repairs levy as it is? Or two, will the NPRSA take on responsibility for any maintenance in the 2026 to 2031 levy cycle? Some examples of that could look like maintenance of capital assets only, all of the maintenance, both preventative and reactive, or some level of maintenance mix in there, right? Currently, we don't have real accurate numbers for any of those options, but we need to, I guess, we're going to present information about potential projects, capital projects for the next levy cycle, and taking account of what our current levy rate is and what the potential costs for future projects are in with a general number, general being me doing research and finding out kind of a rate per square foot for preventative maintenance, not reactive maintenance. We're taking all that information, kind of synthesizing it down to figure out a path forward. We are not at this time asking for the board to approve a levy rate or approve a project list for the next levy. It's just looking at what the potential costs are. Are we just going to be doing what we're doing now, or do we have bandwidth to expand our scope a little bit when it comes to maintenance? So that's what we're asking here. So next slide, please. So this is what our current levy looks like. So our rate is 4 cents. Annual cost to medium homeowners is approximately $29.13. And so our annual revenue is about 1.5 million. And then our total revenue is about 9 million for the total levy currently. So.
I'm sorry, these are a little small. If you need me,
Yeah.
if you need me to read any of them, let me know.
And so this is what we currently have done. So here's our completed repairs and soft costs along with remaining, and those are with estimates. So we're currently, and you'll get an update on our current projects for this year. And then there's one project in 2025 that I presented to you all last summer, which was a crawl space issue that we needed to address over at the Health and Wellness Center. And that is the only real project that we have projected for 2025. We really wanted to keep 2025 pretty open, just depending upon where we're at. And then if we want to implement some kind of reserve plan, we have that kind of going into the next levy. So, yeah, that's where we're at. Any questions about where we're at now in our levy?
Where will we be at in terms of expending the funds? Do we have a sense
At
given
the
that?
end of 2025, we're going to have expended about 8.5 of our 9 million based on these current projections. So we're pretty much spending all of it.
Yeah. All right, so don't let this next slide scare you out, okay? So basically how we got to this next slide is last year we presented kind of a list of projects that we thought we would tackle in a potential new levy. We met with our partners, the senior center, we met with Nathan, and we also took in account of the facilities condition assessment that we had completed in 2019. And we kind of came up with this list of potential projects that we still needed to tackle here at these buildings. And so I took this list and we got some estimations from some subcontractors and contractors. And this is kind of where we came out. So, and this is not like an exhaustive list. This isn't a list that says, you know, obviously it's at like 18 million, which is almost double what our current levy is. So we would obviously have to prioritize this list, you know, going into the new levy. So I just wanted you all to see that we still have work to be done. And this is what it's looking like. And of course, we'll have to prioritize this. So any questions about this slide? Like I said, we're not asking you all to approve a levy or any projects. This is just, I guess, a scope, high level.
The maintenance costs that are up there.
Yes,
what
this is
does that
potential. So this maintenance cost is that number that I let you guys know. I believe it's like $150,000 per building per year. And so then that is only for preventative maintenance on the whole building. So when we're looking at that $2 million, that's for the life of the levy. And that's only for preventative maintenance, not any reactive maintenance.
We have a question from Councilmember Gutowski.
Oh, Robert Dabowski, please do your hand.
Thanks, Deborah. Thanks for this information. Could you explain a little bit, could someone please explain a little bit what the NSC residence conversion project is? And then what's envisioned for the Health and Wellness Center and North Shore Senior Center interior upgrades?
Good question. So the resident conversion, so actually on the second floor here, all the way at the end, there is basically it's a small apartment that previously had an occupant. And within the last 3 years, I believe, Nathan, right? 4? Yeah. That person has left the building or the premises, does not live here anymore. But it is zoned right now as residential. And so there are some changes that we need to make to bring it up to code for commercial use or office use. And that's the intention of the senior center, to use it as office space or a conference room or something
Program
like that.
space.
Yeah, yeah. And then I think there's also, there's a bathroom there that we're thinking about converting to like accessible bathroom. So, yeah, so that's that. And then the interior, it's just revamping the interior space. We really haven't gone into, like huge scoping in that aspect. It really just is like a rate per square foot for interior renovations, that we use there. So.
That would entail stuff like painting,
Painting,
new
lighting.
trim.
Replacing the
Right.
1992 bathrooms. And-
Yeah.
I confess to having, I think, served on this board for a decade now and never knew there was somebody lived at the senior center. I mean,
Yep.
Nathan didn't either. when
It
he
was-
said it.
Do we have more story on?
Was it a caretaker? Did they pay?
Yeah,
rent?
there
I
used
mean,
to be an on-site caretaker, and that's just not a model that we will go back to. And so we really can't use that space in its current configuration much. So we'd love to convert that into usable program space. We're kind of reaching our limit for a lot of times at the senior center now. So we'd love to have that space.
I got to see that with a tour from Nathan. It was great.
I don't know, rent is so much you could maybe make money.
Yeah, I mean, don't throw that one out. That's not bad.
Well,
All right, any other questions that we have about this slide in particular? All right, so moving on, so this is the possible levy rate possible for the next levy. So we're looking at, obviously, with the scope, if we do all of the items at somewhere at 6 cents. So if the board is looking at this and thinking, oh, well, we want to, do everything on this list, then we're going to have to increase the levy rate. If we want to keep it at the current levy rate, we're going to have to prioritize our projects. And so that's all we're trying to get you all to see here. So the next slide is just the choice, right? This is the illustration of where we're trying to go right now. So what we need, what staff needs right now from the board is direction on which way we're leaning. Are we just going to continue what we're currently doing with capital repairs only? Or if the board would like for us to explore different levels of maintenance and what that looks like. So that's kind of where we're at.
Quick question. So, and I haven't delved into this except in an earlier conversation, but do we have a sense of, well, 2 things, in this kind of existing model, what the subsequent 6-year period will look like in terms of costs? So a couple of them, and could any of those ones listed in 26 to 31 be moved over to the next one? I guess what I'm trying to, what I'm getting at is evenness.
Yeah.
evenness.
So we can. So this document, and you all were joining us remotely. This document, which is a draft levy strategy, which is attached to the meeting invite that is on your calendar for this meeting. We put together, by request of board leadership, kind of a levy strategy. So in that document, you have levy 1, which we're in now, and then there's levy 2, which is the 2026 levy. And then there are also 4 other levies into that, after that. So what we did was we took what we're doing now, plus what has already been done, and we worked with Nathan and his team on site to come up with kind of a life cycle for all of, I guess, an age where we're at in the life cycle for all the building components, right? And so we took that with the condition assessment report that we received in 2019 and kind of built out this capital repair strategy. And so there are things that we're doing we're proposed doing in 2026 levy period that could be shifted to levy 3, which would start in 2032. We would need to go through that list and kind of prioritize that. But yes, there are things that need to be, like the elevators, that needs to be addressed in this next levy. So there are things that are, yes, high priority, and then other things, probably like the renovations that we could probably maybe phase, and so we're doing different portions of the buildings at different times or different levies. So there's things that we can do to kind of stretch that out and make it work.
And this is showing up 11.7, which is.
Yes, to your question specifically, I already moved the interior renovations from levy 2 to levy 3 for that.
Yeah, we are.
Just so that it would.
We kind of already thinking about.
Already started.
This is like a living document, right? So, and we'll make sure that we update it as we get more information. We'll just send it out periodically to you all. So
The other thing to make note of as regards that is the numbers that show up in this strategic document are going to be slightly different from the ones you just saw on that slide, because this document is inflation adjusted in a way that the slide is not. So it's going to be a little higher on that spreadsheet.
and you all can actually play with, we have it worked out so that you can actually play with the inflation rate if you want to in your own document.
For lots of fun.
Right.
All right, any other questions?
Is it fair to think of this as like an HOA reserve study, but without the reserve, more like depending upon the.
Yeah. And that's also like too, like, we don't have a reserve strategy currently. Like, so that's something too that the board needs to kind of consider as we're getting into the next levy, so that we can write a policy and like do all the things to make sure that we have reserves in place, right? So, yes.
That was kind of related to the question I had, which was if the levy that the board chooses to go with is capital repairs only, are there any other mechanisms to fund the maintenance? I didn't think so, but
No.
I thought.
Currently, the agreement is that the maintenance is the responsibility of the senior center, as they don't pay like a rent or anything for the buildings. So that's the current agreement. So,
That said, we'll be renegotiating our tenant contract
and
at
then the
the
levy.
beginning of the Senate levy anyway. So if we wanted to make any changes in that regards, great opportunity to do it.
Yeah, I would just, that historically, that's always been a tension in the, and I'll talk a little bit about this a little bit later in the meeting too, but trying to find the right balance of the senior center taking responsibility for maintaining the facilities, but then also trying to weigh the programming needs. So huge facilities that are more expensive than a typical building to maintain. But also we're making together, this is kind of like a public-private partnership. We're making really incredible investments here. And so what's the right balance for finding a way to make sure they get their maximum useful life? And just so everyone knows too, these numbers are also new to us. They're hot off the press. Our board hasn't had a chance to review them either. So we'll be taking this to our executive committee tomorrow. So
Is it fair to say that the buildings are utilized pretty much during all open office hours? Like, or the capacity, I'm guessing, in this building based on the needs of the community?
Definitely at capacity in peak times. Yeah. So the usage has come back during peak times.
Okay.
And we'll continue to, our community has changed by the pandemic, and we're just continuing to find new ways. How do we make maximum use of this building, and what are our strategies as a organization?
And I know I recognize this is kind of a strange question given it's a public-private partnership, but funding for the community center, is that all raised through like fundraising processes? Okay.
Yeah. Our budget is, our revenue sources are about 55-60% government contracts and government funding. We have everything from state, federal, local, county, several counties, cities, so lots of different contracts. It's about 30% user fees and membership fees. And it's about 15, a little bit more than 15% philanthropy and private gifts.
Okay, that's helpful to know.
I have an add-on
You
question.
said,
Go ahead, Sarah, sorry.
sorry, no, you go ahead, you go ahead. I'll raise my hand. I can do that.
I didn't either. With the government contracts, I'm more familiar with the transportation program because I am on I'm actually the president of the Snohomish County Transportation Coalition. And I got to talk to Cliff, who had me over to go over his setup, which was really cool. And do the government funding really covers just those programs, right? It's not funding extra things. It's not.
I want to thank you for raising that point so I don't have to, but that's exactly right.
I didn't think they'd just give you cash and be like, have fun.
Councilmember Perry.
Thank you, Amanda. So I'm just curious, spending an entire life, it feels like, in fundraising before moving into this wonderful opportunity here as elected for King County. I'm wondering, Nathan, about the numbers, and there's this sort of gold seal of 25, like 25, 25, 25, 25, or 20, because you have fee for service. So like 20% fee for service, 20% individual giving, 20% corporate partnerships, corporate giving, 20% private foundations, 20% public funding. And that diversified fundraising portfolio is the same kind of principle in diversifying your income. So that if you have a tsunami on an event day, you got all these other things going on. And when things are tough in corporate world, you've got individuals that, there's that ebb and flow of those different pieces. And I'm wondering if part of what you do or part of what, the community center, like how this whole thing rolls out, I'm wondering if there's attention to those kinds of things to encourage that diversified fundraising base, if that's something you explore, if it's something that we look at like in this model, going forward.
Councilmember Perry, it's a great point, and I agree with, I've spent my career in nonprofit management also, and know that our funding mix is not ideal where you want it to be. I see some of our government funding as stand-in for other sources of funding too, because part of our government funding is actually to kind of subsidize the fee-for-service model a little bit. So it makes it more affordable for people. And so I play with the categories in my mind a little bit as I'm thinking through our funding mix. But your point is spot on. We need to be expanding. It's one of our priorities right now to be expanding our philanthropic efforts and just making sure our funding mix kind of starts migrating to a little bit more of a stable place. That's a multi-year, long-term kind of project. But that's definitely top of mind. It's also tough right now because we serve a community that whose philanthropy is highly impacted by inflation and by the pandemic. So people's giving power has gone down in our community, especially for our donor base. And so we're looking for strategies to kind of how we address that going forward.
And I don't know if Amazon supports, like if this is in their philanthropy framework, or Microsoft, or any of the different corporate partners that want to be good corporate citizens, right? Yep. They're looking for ways to show up, and oftentimes we just don't even think to ask them. And I'm big on, I'll ask Oprah. You just, you can't, if they can't say no, if you don't ask, they can't say no. So, it's always a good plan to give them an opportunity to show up in a positive way for the full community. So I appreciate that you're looking at that. It was just a question about intention and awareness, and I appreciate that.
I have two thoughts, and please bear with me because this is my very first meeting. So if this is like too out of what we're doing, let me know. One, we did just get a quantum computing facility in Bothell, and maybe that will be our Microsoft, right? We can only hope. I'm not going to call it Amazon or Salesforce because we both work there. But the other question is, I know that you guys historically have done some facility rentals. this is a niche interest of mine right now because I'm getting married next year. And there are not a lot of places to get married in Bothell. Like, I don't want to get married with Mendemans because it looks like my junior high. And I like, have you thought about putting money into the facility to get a different level of rental? And I guess, would your programming support more rentals? And then do you see like kind of using what you have? It's good to have like the commercial kitchen, and you see where I'm going. So I'm just curious if that's even an avenue that's possible.
You know what, rentals have always been on the surface, it seems like a really easy match. A rental program for a facility that kind of has a lot of spaces. But once you start digging down, the actual costs of managing a rental program is like a whole different line of business whose margins aren't great.
Gotcha.
And so we actually do have some rental income. In fact, I think, we have, it's a modest revenue stream for us, that I didn't mention, but that is one stream that we can grow a little bit. But we're really focusing on the repeat rentals and not the one-time events, just because there's so much hand-holding and overhead that goes into, like, trying to do one event here. I have to pull in my entire senior team because it impacts all of them. And once you start deducting their time spent on it, like,
And that totally makes sense. I
Yeah.
wasn't sure how feasible it was. I work on a computer all day, so I do not. Yeah, so it makes sense. That sucks.
I think there's still things, so we're looking at things like weddings are really tricky because the demand level is so high. But we're looking at things like some corporate activities where we can kind of roll in some of our programming for an employee engagement or leadership development kind of activity for local businesses. That's a rental that makes a little bit more sense to us, and the margins are better. So, yeah.
Not to mention Nick, I had the same question. Here for the first time, quinceanera in the 90s. So
Right.
I was wondering if we still rented out the gym area.
On it, we're, like I said, we're keeping those kind of at a minimum right now to make sure that we're not losing money on them. And that they're not interfering with programming. But yes, we actually have a couple, because of the construction projects this year, we've kind of kept a damper on the project. We're ramping up our staffing. Jordan's starting to lead this effort now. So we're kind of bringing our rentals up a little bit. We kind of have to scaffold it. And so we'll grow slowly and make sure we're doing the right thing.
Renting to people who aren't having like a stressful day also seems like a good idea.
Right. Yep. Yeah. For both, it's mutual. Right.
Other questions and carries forward a little bit?
All right. So next is the action slide. So really, we're asking the board to give staff the authorization to proceed with planning for either A, capital repairs only levy, or B, capital repairs and explore some level of maintenance. And then at the next meeting, we would have some better numbers and information as far as what maintenance could look like. And then we can make a final decision in May on the route that we're going. But we didn't want to spend too much time because we have, maintenance. It's such a big scope that we're kind of like, hey, let's see if this is even something with the numbers and the information that we know now, if this is something that we should even be considering.
So I'm thinking, let's go with a motion and then we can have the discussion within that. So, Chair will entertain a motion to authorize staff to proceed with capital repairs and some level of maintenance. So moved.
Second.
Okay, so now let's go into discussion. Questions for staff on this?
I don't know how formal we're being. So I think it would be irresponsible not to bake in some maintenance. Like, we don't want to end up in a crappy situation for the next levy. I also think it would be good to dive into some of these projects and just help us identify like what will be critical during this time period, what will be setting us up well for the future, and what's like a sort of like a nice to have, right? Versus like, it doesn't need to happen now, but it would really help us with X, Y, or Z, but we could live without it. So just kind of rating the projects, because if we do get to where we want to have the levy rate stay the same or be close to what it is now, or we want to just shoot for the stars, right? Which I don't think anybody, but I think it's good to have those kind of in context.
Completely concur. And I do have a question. I might have asked this in the past, but can you just tell us kind of in super lay language, kind of the distinction you have between the maintenance and the repairs? Because it kind of seems like a little bit of a gray area in my mind.
So so capital repairs are only repairs on items that add value to the building. So that is like our roof, our HVAC, electrical, things of that nature. So the envelope. So these things that are going to keep the building up, but also keep the add value. So those are what we're doing now. We do have few projects that are sprinkled in that, like the carpet replacement that was not a capital item, but it was kind of a safety concern, especially in one of our buildings. So the NPRSA board chose to do that project.
So in my little brain again, things like having a working elevator and having up-to-date restrooms. So
those
all
are-
those seem to add value, but so I'm still struggling, I guess, with the distinction.
So yeah, so those two would be deemed capital because they add value. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But there are some projects that are on the list that are not fully like on its own adding value. But when you lump them together into like a energy efficiency project, then that adds value. But if we're just changing lights, then that's probably not like an added value.
Okay.
But there are some things that need to be done here, like the interior renovation that wouldn't, like paint and baseboards and carpet. That doesn't really add value, right? But it's also something that we know that on a larger scale that we could help support our partner in doing that with their programming, especially, revamping the interior. So it's kind of, we can definitely set up like prioritization of the projects. And then I think that too in the next levy, when we're talking about these expectations, maintenance expectations, I think really defining those and setting expectations in the contract between us and the senior center. I think that will help that too, because that was it was a lot more gray than the first one was a lot more gray. And then we kind of revamped it in 2019, 2020. And then, I mean, obviously we can do better. So, yeah.
Since I'm not seeing, oh, here we go. Yeah.
I was gonna say that I concur, I'm new here as well, but everything I've seen has been that we've done more and more maintenance over time. I don't see that changing in the near future, so I think we should definitely be planning for it. I know it's again, nonprofit entity separate, but I would love to see if we could also help the senior center with our fundraising mix, to Councilmember Perry's point, and see if we can influence our communities to help them fundraise more and even out those categories, so that when this next levy is up, there might be a potential to move back to the current state if the next board that's here wants to do that and the senior center wants to do that.
That shows a healthy investment also when grantors, oh, sorry, Rod, would you like to speak? I jumped, okay.
No, go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
keep doing that, sorry. It shows a healthy engagement. Many grants, as Nathan will attest, they want to know how much is your leadership giving? And if they're not giving like a huge amount of money, is 100% of your board giving? Are they all in before you're asking us to give? Are other community members that are benefiting from your support giving? And it doesn't matter whether it's 10 or 10,000, are they giving? Do they find this worthwhile? And does enough of a membership or participants, do enough of them find this worthwhile that it's worth our while to contribute to it? because they're willing to put themselves in there first as a commitment. So those are, that's a really healthy showing and for people. And then ultimately, sometimes people will leave a bequest because it has been such a meaningful experience for them to participate in this community that they decide to put it in their estate plan as a portion of their giving. And that allows a whole other endowment opportunity to come forward where you have $1 million from a bequest and 50,000 will come every single year to fund something for Sally Mae, who really loved pickleball or, whatever it was, whatever program it is that that inspires people to support this into perpetuity. So I think it's worthwhile to look into that. And I'm glad you're thinking along those lines and could, I immediately, for me, it's just a curiosity now that I don't have to do it. I'm thinking now, where is all the, giving from all the different senior centers? How are they doing it? What corporations are given, what foundations, and how have they done individual support? Like, people pay for bricks, people pay for, names in church, names on pews, all kinds of different things, right? That you can get creative and clever about. So anyway, glad to hear that.
Councilmember Dombrowski.
Thanks for the discussion. And is it my understanding that option B is the motion on the floor, repairs? Okay.
Yes.
So just by way of a kind of history here, if you'll indulge me, I know historically, as was kind of mentioned, we've kind of had what I would call a modified triple net lease arrangement with the senior center, where we, the NPRSA, own the building. And the original notion was the senior center operator took care of it, except for kind of a few major things which the NPRSA was responsible for. And there was some vagueness there. And I think accurately by Nathan identified, there is some tension here. I think the senior center would naturally like to get some pressure off their budget and have us take on more maintenance items. And I've heard discussion of modifying the contract. So I'm okay with exploring that. I just want to put on the floor that I'm not ready to change personally today, the contractual relationship in terms of the allocation of responsibilities. I really value our partnership, and together, I think we have to work together to deliver this nation-leading senior center and its programming. It will help me in understanding the right balance to learn a little bit more at the right time about the senior center's budget. And I'm coming at this from the taxpayer's perspective, because I know at the county, in our last levy, we added seniors to our Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services levy. And I think the taxpayers have taxed themselves, and we've delivered millions of dollars to our senior center hubs, one of which is North Shore. So if you're looking at it from the total cost of the North Shore area taxpayer paying for senior center services, I want to make sure we keep in mind the additional money they're paying in through the county to fund that. Now, maybe revenue, Nathan, has been lost from other sources, and I just want to understand. I want you all to succeed. When I say you all, I want the senior center. I want us to succeed, but I want to make sure that when we get to, if we're going to do a levy renewal, we get to that rate, that it's kind of a fully informed rate from the taxpayer's perspective as to what they're paying into the senior center, if that makes sense. To me, it comes to a head in the agreement and its allocation of responsibilities for building maintenance. So I'm comfortable today with taking care of what we own for sure, the capital repairs, having a reserve, doing some of the additional stuff that's coming down the line. I'm interested in more information on what maintenance would look like, but I think we should tread carefully there.
Okay, so the motion is on the floor. Oh, other questions? Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask this question in the language I've come up with. I'm just curious, you can feel free to say pass, but if NPRSA takes on the cost of maintenance, and the senior center was not paying rent and covering maintenance per the original lease, would there be some rent then coming in? Would that be part of it? I guess, because that brings up a question. I live in Snohomish County, so I don't pay that levy, but I remember what Councilmember Dombrowski is saying. So I'm just curious, would that change the agreement as the responsibilities change, or are we not envisioning that? And again, feel free to pass. I realize that might be a loaded question. I'm just looking at you too, because I don't know who's negotiating it.
Oh, that I feel like it's a discussion that needs to be had at some point. I don't foresee, like that being completely off the table. But yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Nate?
We've had this longstanding partnership and it's always been negotiated. And I would say, both to your point and also to Councilmember Dombowski's point, my feeling is it is performed best when it's been negotiated well at a detailed level. So we all know what our responsibilities are. And that's what I think we want to look for to the next tenant agreement and going to the levy.
And to these last few points, I think, I mean, we're kind of hearing a direction that this is probably going to go, but I think it would be helpful for us to have information on kind of what's the current state of the contract and what have been the challenges with that. So we understand, what are the issues that have come up that we're trying to address with this potential new direction. So that would be helpful, I think. Kind of getting down to some granularity. I know it's not going to be fun necessarily to do that in a board setting. You're going to need to do that. And then having it paired with the senior center budget. I think that's a really important point that Councilmember Dombowski brought. Are we at a point where we can go to, sorry, yeah.
Just one last point. I think this has been said, but I just wanted to highlight that I think this should definitely include some discussion of a reserve build up there. Just to.
Oh, and I did have one other question. I forgot. Sorry, I'm sorry. I keep going back. I know that in the past there has been some discussion of staffing for NPRSA, and just from various folks saying, "Gosh, this is kind of working. It's kind of kludgy," and so I guess I'd love to see that. It's not exactly what this says, but as we move into doing some work on the numbers for the next levy, I'd appreciate having some information on that. That's a little bit off topic, I realize. I don't know that we need a motion, but I just don't want to let that go off the table. Yep. So
We consider it as part of.
yeah. All right. Other questions? Okay, are we ready to take a vote? Okay. Who calls that? Do I call that? All right. So the motion on the table with a second is to authorize staff to proceed with planning for a levy for capital repairs and some level of maintenance. That's item B up there. And all in favor.
Sorry, Dombowski, can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
I'm sorry. So I understood this, we're collecting information, but as I read it, we would be authorizing staff to prepare a plan to renew the levy with, capital repairs and maintenance. So are we gonna have are we getting information or are we committing now
Yes.
to take?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So
Okay.
so I think planning with a big broad P.
Okay, okay. All the stages, the
you.
research, the information.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
The
Thank you so
intention
much.
is just that this is going to take staff time and potentially consultant time for us to put together. And we don't want to expend those resources without the board
Direction.
authorization. So that's the entire intention behind this.
So I think we're at the point of actually taking a vote. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay. Right, the ayes have it. All right, so we are at discussion item potential Kenmore Senior Center
All right.
inclusion into NPRSA.
Okay, so, previous boards have considered bringing the Kenmore Senior Center into the fold of the NPRSA. But it wasn't supported enough for us to move forward, staff moving forward to get more information. And so we've had that come up, with our current board. And so we want to kind of start a discussion about it and maybe get some direction from the board on further investigating the possibilities of this. So I don't know if, I guess the intent here is for the board to fully, as a board, discuss the possibility of adding the Kenmore Senior Center into the NPRSA. And if, if it doesn't go anywhere, then we leave it where it is. And if the board does want to at least have a look and see if it is a possibility or what that could look like, then the staff will start kind of gathering information on that, making connections.
Let's go back maybe 10,000 feet too. I don't know if everybody here understands the relationship between the facility. Yeah, so just, I don't know who wants to, Nathan, maybe do you want to describe that relationship, kind of what the senior center is and how it relates to?
Sure. So, because we're North Shore Senior Center, so nothing's simple. So North Shore Senior Center consists of these campuses here in Bothell, which are owned by the NPRSA, and the NPRSA administers them. Separately, North Shore Senior Center has contracts with the city of Kenmore to operate the Kenmore Senior Center, to operate the Kenmore Senior Center in the building in Rhododendron Park where that is set. And then we also have a no-cost lease in the city of Mill Creek where we operate the Mill Creek Senior Center as another satellite. The Mill Creek location is actually, so interestingly enough, the NPRSA boundaries, are part of Snohomish and King County, but the Mill Creek Center is outside the boundaries of the NPRSA. So we serve the community in Mill Creek, but it's not in the NPRSA boundaries, which is also true of communities like Lake Forest Park, Shoreline, Kirkland. We serve folks from those communities, but they don't necessarily fit within the NPRSA boundaries. However, the Kenmore location is in the NPRSA boundaries. And so that's a city-owned facility in a city park. So there's been a question raised by the NPRSA board if that could be rolled into in the NPRSA in some way or another. That's not something the senior center has tackled in a thoughtful way. And so we'd want to be looking at it closely at the same time you were, if that's something that the NPRSA board wants to take on.
Right, and I think there may be maybe option 4, unless option 4 is off the table, which would be, NPRSA participating in the maintenance of a facility that still remains city-owned. I think that is a potential 4th option. Which is actually how I think I've heard it, as opposed to actually saying, Kenmore is going to, transfer the building and the ownership to another entity. So do you want to say just maybe one more piece about kind of the condition and kind of the bigger picture? Yeah, so.
It is, this is a public meeting, so let me choose my words.
Yes.
It is an adorable spot, and it is a really cool, it used to be the caretaker's cottage for what used to be an estate where Rhododendron Park is. So it's a former residence. It's a pretty old facility. It's small. I'm really proud of what we've been able to do out of that facility. It's 2 separate buildings joined by a breezeway. We've managed to make some pretty awesome lemonade, spiked lemonade out of a little bit of a lemon that's not built to do this kind of function. That being said, we kind of reached what we can do there. And so long-term, again, this might be speaking out of turn, but I think in my discussions with our community, we'd be looking at moving beyond that facility, going down the road. We'd like to be doing something in Kenmore, like all of our North Shore communities deserve spaces where older adults can live to their fullest potential. And we're doing some great work in Kenmore, but we'd love to do more. I wouldn't want to invest in trying to do way too much at the Kenmore current location. Is that right?
Yeah, there's definitely, I think at least what I've heard, and maybe Marie can speak to this, but there are certainly plenty of capital maintenance issues. I think, to your point, I don't know that we want to be investing a lot in an older facility that has space limitations and just structural limitations, but wanted to bring it to the table for discussion. So particularly the option 4 that isn't there.
I think, I agree that every community deserves a space like this. And we're really lucky to have it here and that it can serve so many people. We're also clearly looking at funding issues. So I wonder about the thought of taking on a gorgeous, historic, old and small building that is already maxed out in doing what it's doing. And if the problem that needs to be solved is there needs to be more space for more programming, I guess when we take this on, how will we pay for it? How will we be good stewards of money? Will we be collecting more money somehow to pay for it? Like, I guess I'm wondering, like, it sounds great, but then when we look at the budgeting and stuff, it gives me a lot of hesitation. And how could we do that well? And I guess, like, is it that is it Kenmore or that senior center's maybe separate board that's asking us to consider this? Was this just like an idea? So
It came from this.
Yeah.
okay, okay. I guess I feel like I'm missing a piece about like how to make it work well.
Yeah, so let me give maybe one more piece of context. I mean, there is no separate board. I mean, it's, it's operated by
It's us.
us. Yeah, it's by the
So the
senior.
city just
It
pays
just owns the
North
building,
Shore to,
owns the building.
okay, gotcha.
Yeah, the facility. And, Nathan's group does the programming and it's amazing. I think now I lost my train of thought. Oh, I know what it was. This is part of what we've talked about kind of colloquially as concentric circles. So right now, NPRSA is supporting these facilities. And actually the capital improvements on these facilities. And, we're now just talking about maybe adding some maintenance. So the next concentric circle in thinking about the next levy or future ballot measures is, what would expanding the NPRSA concept to other facilities, other senior center facilities within the boundaries. So that would be this kind of thing that we're talking about now. And then the third concentric circle is the next item, which is that, we're doing this, needs assessment and feasibility study this year, to potentially think about, what would be even broader than that. Maybe there's another community facility that needs to be built or, and that could be under the NPRSA umbrella. Definitely all of those additional concentric circles, whether it's the Kenmore facility or, other pieces would be voter initiatives. I mean, they'd have to be, they would be more money, absolutely true. So, and they expand our scope. I think that's what I was bringing to the board is, how are we thinking of NPRSA? The voters have approved the current model. So that's where we're at now. So the question is, do we ask the voters to expand the scope? Yep. Okay. Councilmember Devas. It's hard to do both.
Thanks for having this agenda item on here. I think of it as kind of an equity in terms of investment and then the corresponding access to the services for the investment. And we're providing those services to Kenmore at the kind of rhododendron park location. But so I don't think it's a stretch, at least in my mind, to look in terms of a levy that's designed to make investments in our facilities to ensure we have adequate facilities in Kenmore to go with the programming. It seems like acquiring that site is maybe not really the right concept in my mind because it's in a city park and all that, but making sure the roof doesn't leak, and that the HVAC system is there and, that it has ADA accessibility. Those kind of things I think are, to me, reasonable to explore. And, maybe it's part of the planning effort from the prior motion, but to include what kind of capital investment at either an existing or new facility could be on the table for ensuring adequate services to folks that live over on the Kenmore side of the district. That's kind of how I think about it. And I'm supportive of exploring that notion, almost in the really in the planning of the levy.
So I,
But by the way, I wouldn't leave Woodinville out either if, there's some programming over there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think there is some question with the building being owned by the city. I think it would be much more difficult to operate a capital only program over a building owned by another entity with another third entity running. That does introduce, I think, a lot of complications in that scenario. And when you talk about the concentric circles, to me, when we talk about the next business item or the discussion item on potentially looking at a youth facility, I see that as a circle that could consume that smaller Kenmore piece and provide maybe that building that we then own and maintain in a way that eliminates some of those questions. I certainly don't want to see the senior center operating in a building that's, falling down around them. And I do see that as something within the purview of the NPRSA to examine. But I would just be very cautious about taking on any responsibility to that, especially as we are awaiting kind of feedback from our community about what other facilities we may or may not want to try and invest in. So.
Questions or comments? I mean, I think you're kind of looking for, is there an appetite for even exploring?
Correct.
Yes.
And I think I'm hearing that there's an appetite for at least finding out what we're even talking about in terms of, major capital needs over the next 6 years, but not having that necessarily blended in with the previous discussion. I think I'm hearing that. Maybe I'm not hearing that.
Well, I do like keeping the main thing and letting the process that we've decided on with regard to the survey and so forth play out, and help set those priorities from the data. Data's good.
Yeah, I'm really curious about the needs assessment and what that will reveal. I also think it's all of our cities have a hard time housing our seniors, people who can pay less for housing. And I wonder if as we look at expansions, if we can pair it with, it's 2 stories of a senior center and then 4 stories of housing, right? And if it's a youth center, maybe there's family housing, there's senior housing. Because I'm a big fan. We talked about this in our NPRSA seniors committee meeting. You don't make things just for one group of people, right? Because no group of people is homogenous. Seniors are a varied group. I know seniors who travel constantly and live very glamorous lives. And I know a senior like my dad who it's hard to get him out of the house. And I think looking at ways to take the needs assessment, and if we want to really create this cool vision that we can honestly get taxpayer buy-in on, I think something that serves the whole community could be really interesting. So I don't want to wait, and I don't want to not serve the people at the Kenmore Center, but I do think it might be the next level up too.
Yeah.
And it might be kind of a marriage of all these different floating concerns. That's a really weird way to say it.
I mean, what I'm hearing is, let's let the assessment process go forward, find out what the needs are. Along with, let's understand what if there are immediate needs potentially, with the Kenmore side. I mean, I think it's all part of the discussion. I mean, I don't hear anybody saying, let's take this off the table. I'm also not hearing any enthusiasm for elevating this over and
Cautiously
above
optimistic.
the needs assessment and what that might reveal.
And I do think it's important, the data, Kenmore has a poverty level of 6.4%. and Bothell 4.9%. These are really, really low poverty levels comparatively for King County. That doesn't mean there's not poverty. So, 6.4% of 23,500 for Kenmore is still what it is at people at 15,000 or less, which is it's a really debilitating level of income for folks in such a high economy area in terms of housing. But the housing targets for Kenmore or for Bothell were 3,190 and through 44. 0 to 30% is half of that, so 1,155, so almost half, and then 0 to 30, but with permanent supportive housing is another 608. When you start looking at those pieces, housing and poverty, and knowing also that this District 1, Councilmember Dembowski's district, has the single highest senior population in all of King County. So the need for this community is higher. There's not additional income coming in, and just paying attention to what those spaces are versus my district, which has the highest number of youth, 17 and under, in all of King County. So it's an interesting juxtaposition for the two. But and this is maybe way off topic at this point. I'm just about to hit the pillow, I think. I'm so tired. So forgive me if I'm not, offline here, off topic. But one of the things that Councilmember Dembowski and I and others are looking at with the comprehensive plan is congregate housing. And it's like dorms, and senior dorms in Kirkland and Redmond are happening right now, where there's this middle space, shared kitchen, shared bathrooms, and everybody has their room. And that's another opportunity. When I think about these kinds of buildings, it's interesting to think about very low income opportunities for people who can stay in community as seniors around this. And so I'm sure that's just a way off in a different direction, but I feel like there's something about, I don't know, how the housing need that's here and the very high number of seniors that should be paid attention to if we're thinking about new spaces or adding on things. Way off.
No, I think this is a good segue to our item 6B2, which is, what we would need to be in the assessment, but I think we do have some other topics we need to get through. Yeah.
Sorry, I know you want to move on, but if I can just circle back on this item, it seems to me our senior center, not us, but our senior center is providing services in Kenmore. If the city of Kenmore said today, hey, that building, it's no longer usable, you have to go, that would leave a hole in our service provision to the community. And if it's for want of, on the dollars we're talking about, $100,000, $200, $300,000, a couple of years to get the place, keep it going, I really think we ought to consider that in the levy planning, or, look at the next generation of facilities. But it's such a big area, right? The North Shore area that we cover, that's why we have a footprint over there. And so I think just in the senior services space, I would encourage us to be open to making sure we bring capital dollars to where we're delivering services to seniors within the district. I'm going to leave Mill Creek out of it, Nathan.
Well, I'm not hearing anybody say, let's take it off the table. I think we want the information and then we can make some decisions, So, yeah, awesome.
And all second everything else about co-location and all that was all good. Okay, thanks.
Do you feel like you have what you need for this item? Yeah. Okay, so Nathan, we're on reports.
Okay, Nathan has his own slides. I'm going to need a second to pull those up.
It's fancy. So Christine let me know that in some of the conversations with board members, some of board members were asking for a little bit more information about what we do as senior center around repairs and maintenance. And so I wanted to go a little bit of a deeper dive today, kind of diving into what we are spending on occupancy. Our
folks online, can you see this new presentation now?
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
Thanks.
before we get into this, Nathan, I am concerned on our time. Can folks stay a little bit after 8? Who cannot stay a little bit after 8? All right. Oh, Sarah can't. Okay.
I will go
Sorry.
quickly.
Okay.
Sorry, no, take your time. Sorry, I don't need to. I can catch up.
Okay.
So Barbara, if you would go to the next slide, I want to report out on kind of what we did in 2003 with maintenance and repairs. So we spent, North Shore has a budget of about
Oh, you just said 2003, but it's 2023. Your slide had the right year. I think that was.
Okay. So we spent about 200,000 in maintenance, repairs, janitorial utilities. That's kind of our occupancy line item. And in addition to that, we have a full-time professional facilities coordinator, and about 80% of Jordan's time is dedicated to our Bothell facilities. And so that together is about 9% of our older, a little bit over about 9% of our overall budget. Our operating budget is on facilities. Our facilities, I mentioned before, if we're not operating an office building, right? We have some expenses that are kind of atypical. We got 2 fully operational commercial kitchens, extensive grounds that we're trying to maintain and make functional. We have 3 elevator lifts. I scream every time I think about how much it costs to operate and maintain those elevators. As much as these buildings are lovely, they're not very energy efficient, even with the improvements we've made. Our utilities costs are exceptionally high for the buildings we operate. And then just historically, there hasn't, just in the life of these buildings, no one's fallen around this table. There hasn't been a lot of funds for maintenance and repairs. And so there is a lot of deferred maintenance that we're trying to kind of catch up on. So that being said, we're still, smaller nonprofit. Let me show you how we kind of spent our 200,000 on the next slide last year. The biggest line item that we spend money on is actually utilities. Utility costs for these centers runs about $100,000 a year. So $100,000 for sewer, water, electricity, utilities to keep the buildings going. Then we also have about 32,000 in maintenance, about 14,000 in repairs, and about 50,000 in janitorial. So we kind of spread out those funds. Janitorial also being, we lump that in there because that's an important part of actually keeping your facilities maintained. So on the next slide, just to break down a few more maintenance highlights. Lowlights, highlights, I don't know what you want to call them. If we're doing maintenance, we do our quarterly elevator inspections. We have fire suppression systems because we have commercial kitchens that are pretty complex. Fire alarm monitoring across both businesses or both buildings. Grease trap cleanouts, which are, because we have 2 commercial kitchens, and stormwater. So there's a lot going on there too. Exterminators, we have a lot of food programs that happen. So making sure our grounds are well maintained is really important. Landscaping irrigation systems across a variety of landscapes. Appliances are a huge deal in our buildings just because there's so many of them. Snow and ice removal. We have a population that's very sensitive to safe conditions, so that's really important. And then boiler and HVAC servicing is also something that we did a lot of last year. The next slide is repairs. Again, irrigation systems, plumbing, heat pumps, boilers, sump pumps, appliance repairs, automatic door repairs. These are the sort of things that add up every year, and they're hard to budget for. We don't know when they're coming, but that's kind of how we spent about 14 grand last year. Just a few highlights for next year. We're 2024, well, this year, we're increasing our maintenance budget by about 18%. We want to keep growing the use of volunteers where appropriate in helping to maintain our facilities. And then one of the things on our list this year is to keep doing good coordination with NPRSA on our capital projects. And then we're looking at picking up that project. For a while, some of you may remember we were trying to do some pickleball courts outside. That idea has kind of morphed as the feasibility of it got a little bit tough. But we really have some really good ideas about how to reanimate and reactivate our outdoor spaces that we're hoping we can get to this year. So those are on the ticket for 2024. I'll stop there just to see if folks have questions. I can dive deeper, or if there's other stuff I can come back to later time. Hearing none. Is there anybody on the,
Anybody on the Zoom have questions? See,
That was very helpful for me. Thank you, Nathan.
there we go.
I did want to add just one program note, because I hate being all business in a meeting like this. But just quickly, we do a lot of work and have done the last few years, kind of looking at how we serve underserved cultural communities that are in the senior centers. And one of the things we know is that serving cultural communities often involves intergenerational programming. A lot of diverse communities aren't, used to like dropping your elders off at a building for a few hours. And so intergenerational programming is something we paid a lot of attention to. This week, we actually launched another partnership with Indian American Community Services. They're running some early learning parenting classes here with small children. And I will just say, it's been a while since I've had toddlers run around my house. Nothing like having a dozen little tiny toddlers running around in the hallways to make you realize the childproofing you need to do around your building. So it was a delightful thing on Tuesday having them here. It was a lot of fun and kind of lightened up the place. So just a quick program note for you.
Childproofing and also keeping things accessible. So I had a toddler and my dad in a wheelchair at the same time. It is a special art. So applaud you.
Yep, we're excited to take on the challenge.
I love the intergenerational aspect of that. That is lovely and very healthy, very
Yeah.
life-giving. Yeah.
For sure.
Right, Christine,
All
take it away with current.
Right, so the first thing we'll dive into are, capital repairs, project updates. So we're doing the envelope repairs, the handrails on the pedestrian bridge, and then we're painting the envelope of the Health and Wellness Center. So we are still scoping and getting estimates and bids from our contractors. We got some preliminary, we got one bid yesterday, so we really haven't dug through that completely. But we're looking good to potentially start on May of this year on all the projects. So yeah, we're just looking forward to ramp up to, construction time and get back out here at the senior center. So yeah, everything's looking really good. The numbers that I did see fell within the budget. So I think it's going to be noisy.
Doing
You should have heard the toddler.
But we'll work through it. We worked through all of the HVAC and roof stuff here. So we're just to get started. So not a whole lot to give you there, but I
Mr. Rod,
did.
could I ask a question on the envelope?
Sure.
Okay, I just want to tie a button on this in my mind, or tie a ribbon on this in my mind, not tie a button. As I recall, we at one time, we were not certain we'd be able to afford to remediate any of the suspected rot. We surveyed the building for moisture. And is this, when you say the senior center envelope repairs, will this complete all of the known and identified I'll call it rot and repairs into
Yes.
the envelope that are
Yep.
needed. So, okay, that's a
Correct.
big, huge good news story.
Yep. Yep.
And
It
it's
can be.
well under budget,
Yep.
so that's good too.
Okay, and so if my recollection is from our original vision 5 years ago, and the list of projects, that was the one we were worried we might be able to not get done, but we really, as I understand, we'll be able to go back to the voters and say, check, 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 check. We did what we knew needed to be done.
Yes, and after we finish this round of projects this summer, we're already ramping up to start a report card. So we already are thinking about that going into our levy planning phasing. So yeah, we're gonna take some nice pictures and do a nice little flyer, and yeah, it's gonna be great.
Questions for Christine? And I realize I didn't ask for Nathan's presentation either. So questions? It's beautiful.
We'll go to the youth center real quick. So one thing, so we're going through on the next slide, we'll go through the schedule. But the one point that I did want to make is that we are going to be forming a community advisory committee for the needs assessment. And the duration of this committee will be about 8 months. And we are looking at about 4 to 6 meetings via Zoom that'll last about 1.5 hours for the participants. And the potential participants that we're looking at, we have a list here. So the senior center, the NSD, we're thinking about an LGBTQIA plus group, most likely Eastside Pride or PFLAG. And then we have Boys and Girls Club or YMCA or both. And then we'll reach out to the Youth Center for Excellence and also UW Bothell and Cascadia. So if anyone has any other recommendations of potential participants that we want to include in our advisory committee, let me or Barbara know, and we can definitely reach out to them.
There's a group called Pride Across the Bridge by Axton Burton. And there's a little challenge with East Side Pride in that there's people with lived experience are challenged by the number of people on the board or the dearth of people on the board who have lived experience in East Side Pride. So that they've been challenged. They know that's a challenge, and yet they have very few that are actually members of the LGBTQ community. And so that's a challenge that those who are members struggle with. But Pride Across the Bridge with Axton Burton is an excellent resource. I can connect you with them. And they do there's the Rainbow Elders Pancake Breakfast in Carnation. The Little Stone Church in Carnation has this Rainbow Elders Pancake Breakfast, and Axton is a big part of that as well. So it's with youth and with seniors.
Awesome. Councilmember Nivas? Brad, did you? Oh, okay. I have a question. Give other people a chance. Yeah.
Would it make sense to loop in the cities?
Yeah.
Like we have a human services
So
coordinator.
we have so that was my next point, is that we have a community advisory committee, but we also have a steering committee that will be composed of staff members of the different member agencies.
I have another question now. So, and this is maybe about the relationship between the advisory committee and NPRSA. So what would would NPRSA still have input at the same level as the advisory committee? And if not, I think we'd want, electeds from the city to be on.
So the point of the advisory committee is to give feedback from all the different perspectives on, so can you move to the next slide?
Yeah.
So
Yes,
specifically,
so,
for
yeah.
example.
So we have 3 surveys.
Yeah.
That will go out to our community members. And so those are where the stars are.
Right.
And so our hopes is that we will then get feedback. There's two different feedback. So our steering committee will give us feedback on survey questions and stuff like that from the internal aspect, right? But then we have an external component, which is the advisory committee that will also be giving us their feedback at the same time.
Right. I guess the piece that's missing is kind of the us piece. So I just, the electeds from the cities, not necessarily being represented on a body that would give input onto the surveys. So
If I can address that a little bit.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I think in many ways, it's the NPRSA staff's job to seek your input and
okay.
to make sure that the NPRSA board members' interests and input inform the survey process. So
Yeah, so if that's
Yeah.
happening, then
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. I just wasn't quite clear because it's certainly complementary to the NPRSA, but we just want to retain some input as well.
I think, and it might be too small, but, well, and I don't know if it's me or the slide, or the time of day, but, I think it'd be good to call out where we'll kind of get updates and chances to provide feedback throughout this timeline. Is that kind of the same?
Yeah, well, because I'm noticing, if you're talking about a survey going out in April, that's tomorrow kind of thing, so so I just want to make sure that we're having input before something like that goes out, because that that sets the table for all of these discussions. So I think we definitely want to have that opportunity. Whether it's all together or at least getting individual perspectives.
So I do want to say it's pretty significant to be very clear about how involved this board will be in survey development and survey approval, because it will really slow down this project. And so I think what's very, very critical is that the communications and engagement staff and the recreation staff or park staff from each of the member cities via that steering committee use their expertise to help create this engagement effort that is really going to be credible and is going to be wonderful. I think that's really the key. And so, however, electeds in this room can help I'm speaking with my NPRSA hat on right now, not my City of Bothell hat. However, electeds in this room can impress upon their city managers and city staff that this really is important and it's a big effort. And if they can have their staff help us, it'll make the entire engagement effort that much more smooth.
So where were you thinking of the advisory committee being formed in this?
I think
We're starting to reach out to different groups now.
Okay, because they would have input before this first survey goes out, right? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. We just want
Yes.
to make sure that the, stakeholders that we're valuing,
Yes.
have input on the ground floor, because otherwise they're not going to feel valued, right? So, yeah.
I will say the engagement effort will look different. So it's such that the staff would probably help the consultants and NPRSA staff create the surveys. And then the community advisory committees are more than responding to what's kind of been proposed and saying, hey, this is right or not.
Yeah.
Just to kind of get. Yep.
Councilor Novosky.
Hi, thanks so much. This is really helpful to see. Just in terms of potential folks for the Community Advisory Committee, and Amanda could probably talk to this, Councilmember Dodd. I mean, hopefully would talk to NUSA and see if they had a person that might make sense to participate.
I was thinking that, yeah, I
Okay.
agreed. And Celia, do you know Celia Sodal who runs that? So I'm happy to connect you two if that would be helpful. So yeah, and Sarah also is on NUSA, so
Awesome.
you have options.
Sorry, I only have a tiny little screen, so it's hard for me to see who's there.
If there's
Thanks for
anything
indulging in
anyone needs to
remote,
read off.
Attendance.
I can send this out to you
Oh,
all
I
too.
can see the program. I just can't see your beautiful faces. And then, maybe some of the North Shore kind of athletic, like the Little League folks or some of the athletic organizations that are, involved with young people might be interesting to talk to. But maybe the Center for Excellence would be a conduit there because I think they're pretty connected with the athletic side of things. And then you mentioned the steering committee, and maybe I missed that here, but maybe you could help me understand like who that is and how that relates. And then finally, I think it would be great if we had the consultants join us for our next meeting to kind of meet them and so they could meet us and we have a connection there.
I think they're actually planning to.
Can't remember, but we'll make it happen. All right, so the steering committee, to your question, so we were thinking that it would be great if we could have, because none of us are experts in parks and recs specifically. That we would have, we would lean on our member agency cities and their parks and rec staff to help us, especially when we get to programming, possible programming and identifying sites and site analysis, that would probably be helpful to have the input from Parks and Recs professionals that work within our cities.
Who's the staff member you're working with in Woodinville? Because we don't have.
I asked Jerry to send me an email to connect you with someone, and he said that he would. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Because we don't have any Parks and Rec staff or human services staff, so this is going to be an interesting internal. who is the person?
Or maybe even like a community outreach person, that would be great. Yeah, that perspective.
Okay.
Yeah, Deborah, if I could speak up as the Recreation Program Supervisor for the City of Kenmore. I'm looking at the timeline. As with Rob, my screen is really small, but it looks to me like the first public outreach is in April. And yet my understanding from the conversation is that the survey itself is not developed yet.
No,
Is that
we're,
correct?
yeah, we're starting to get, my next email tomorrow is going to be getting the, community engagement folks from each of the cities together. I'm still waiting on Jared to respond. But we're going to get, the community engagement folks at the 3 cities together so that we can start kind of talking about this, because the first survey is really demographic based. And so we want to make sure the cities are in agreement on language and things like that in the survey. So we're going to start there. The hopes is that we get the survey out by the end of April, but our consultant is already thinking about moving the timeline back because we're pushing that line, right? So, but we're going to work to get the 3 city community engagement folks together to start that those combos. Yeah.
Can I just put a pin in your calendar that the very last time you can get any information through the school district, through the North Shore School District, out to families is the 2nd week of May. And it will need to be submitted to the school the 1st week of May. So if you want an e-flyer, if you want a communications, if you want anything to go through the school district to the families, it will need to get to the communications department of the school district by the 1st week of May. And then you're going to lose the end of the school year and have to start over again in the fall.
Great reminder.
Thank you. Do folks have a few more minutes? I feel like this isn't quite done yet. Okay. Yeah.
The steering committee sounds like it's still kind of being baked, waiting on cities, hopefully not our city. And then, same with the community panel. So when those are set, could we just get an email with who's included? I think that would be good.
Yeah. So, yeah, I had a conversation with Amy Cass this morning and they are definitely wanting an outreach, ASAP so that they can bring it up and decide on somebody on Monday at their meeting.
Yep.
This is super helpful to know that it's, 8 months, 4 or 6 meetings, all of that. That was super helpful.
I also spoke with the deputy superintendent of the school district a couple of weeks ago, who also advised that she would be happy to help coordinate their representative to the advisory committee. Super helpful. I did just want to make kind of an overarching comment about this community engagement effort. I want to be really clear about this. What you're all embarking upon is going to be an incredibly difficult engagement effort. And so we're super excited about it, but we have to do this really well. And so I want you to know that we work with a consultant. We're asking a lot of questions and we're trying to be very strategic and very thoughtful, because the minute we put out any messaging about any kind of potential project, the way you set that messaging and the way you tell that story from day one, it's going to impact our ability to be successful for the duration of this project. So we've been pretty clear with board leadership. Some of us on staff are going to be very vocal. We're going to be very clear. We're going to be very direct in what we need from you. And we're going to be very strong in our recommendations. Please know that we're doing that because we want you to be successful. But 3 cities and a couple of counties on a board and an engagement effort like this, it's going to be hard, but we want it to be done really, really well. So thank you very much for entrusting us to do this on your behalf.
Pretend we're on the East Coast.
And tell it like this. The outreach is both a survey and additional outreach, or it really is just a survey?
It's 3 surveys. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the first.
Yes.
The first piece is a survey. So that's, just give us a little fleshing out here. That's a representative sample across the district. What are we talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. And you said it's kind of demographically focused. So assuming that kind of stratification there are, but the content is not about demographics, it's
No,
about the
but
needs.
Content's very much high level priorities.
Yeah, there you go.
needs, That's what it is, yeah.
Other questions, comments? Sounds like we should work through with our staff and make sure that our staff are being responsive to NPRSA staff and, all right. What else?
That's
This is super
yeah,
helpful.
that's all I had. So as we're working through this, we will update you all. We'll send emails out, when we get the steering committee and the advisory committee formed. I will invite, ARC, our consultant, to come and talk, meet with the board in May. And yeah, I think that we're on track, and, hopefully we can get the city's outreach teams together so that we can start, the survey. So.
And remind us when our next, we have been on an every other month cadence, but, okay, so here we go.
Yep. So
Very nice.
So we do have one thing to bring up, staff wants to bring up. We had a few board members, ask. Well, we've had board members, tell us that there was issues with people joining remotely. Either one can't hear us or and two can't see us, when we're in person. And so, we had an idea about maybe the possibility of moving our regular meetings remote only outside of our one meeting that we have a public hearing for, which is in November. So we just want to kind of put that out there and see if that's something that we want to do, or if we just stay with what we're doing currently. So.
Oh, Sarah?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, okay.
She waved.
Yeah, okay. It's remote. What do people feel about going 100% remote? Rod? You typically.
I'll do either. I defer to you all. This works really nice if there's a scheduling jam, to be able to do the remote, but it's like there's value in being in person too.
Either way, but, I mean, is it?
I just want to make sure that everybody's able to participate fully. I mean, if we're not hearing, half the conversation, like if we're joining remotely, then.
Okay. I'll say from tonight, this setup worked really well, except
Okay.
it's just a little bit hard to see individuals in the room, but that's relatively minor, but the audio's been great and the slides have been great, and
Okay, good.
I
And,
don't know how it's been on your end, but it's been very effective here.
and do you recall, I mean, was it Sarah? I mean, she's left. I'm just curious who, was having.
It was Sarah.
Yeah.
It was also me.
Okay.
Particularly, I mean, I've mostly been in person at these meetings,
Yeah.
but then at our last one, which we were all remote at, I actually found it more easier, I should say, to hear and see everyone in the room, because I find this a little bit awkward. I probably live the closest to this building, so it's not a hardship for me to come here in person, but also it may facilitate, we haven't had a huge number of people in person for these, and so it may facilitate some of the discussion. It's certainly one of the things I noticed.
Marita? Did you have a comment,
Yeah.
Marita?
I would just, I had trouble logging in today, but once my Wi-Fi at home worked, I can see you all. You're just minuscule, so hello. But I would like to come in person sometimes as well, especially once we are going to be delving into some of the nitty-gritty details. I think I don't know. I think having the option is great because I'm sure some of you have very busy schedules. So being able to zoom in is a great aspect, but I think the goal would be to all meet in person.
And is it Barbara? Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I have not had any problem with audio since you began the official meeting. And so just wanted to let you know that has all been fine.
Well, I'm hearing people still like the hybrid. I mean, it seems like that's what we're hearing. I personally am curious whether anybody is interested in changing the time to earlier to like, marry up at the end of like a normal work day. But I don't know if that works for people more like 4:30, 5 o'clock. I'm. Oh my God. I like that. Okay. I don't know if that works for people, but.
That could work for us. This room is occupied at that time, but we have a similar setup in another room across the street, so we could meet across the street instead of here.
I personally find the 6:30 time kind of awkward. It's neither evening nor, before, but that may be just me. Our new members or Barbara, Christine, Becky,
I'm same way.
It works for me.
the earlier.
On Wednesdays, I don't have school pickup, so my nights are much looser and, but you got the 3 kids, so.
Could probably be here by 5. It's probably the earliest.
Should we
Change it.
should we try it?
We could try it.
Try it.
All right, let's try it.
Okay. Let's give it a whirl.
All right.
All right. Does 5, Rod? Does that work?
That's great, and that feels a little more humane for our staff too.
Yeah.
To have
Yeah,
them
yeah,
to work
exactly.
late into the night is,
Yeah.
it's a big lift, so, they didn't sign up for this. We did, right?
Right, you did. All right, very good. All right, well, I think we are at the end. I'm gonna call to adjourn the meeting, and it is 8:10. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A little over.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, bye.